Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Stephen Nehrenz with This Week in Weather.
Hey everyone, Meteorologist Stephen Nehrenz here. Welcome to another edition of This Week in Weather on this Tuesday, August 5th. As always, really appreciate you tuning in for this as we stream from the News on 6 digital studio. As always, plenty to talk about on the weather side of things this week. And as I always start with, if you've got questions, comments, suggestions on additional things you'd like to hear discussed here on This Week in Weather, you can know where to find me with my email, the address on the screen, my Facebook page, and also, again, as I always say, comments on this post on the This Week in Weather here on the YouTube channel. I took the comments, the YouTube comments as well. And we've had some comments some weeks already of whether it's interesting phenomenon in the weather, whether it's here locally or elsewhere that you'd like to hear discussed about, or maybe it's just even something in our weather pattern that maybe you have always wanted to hear a little more detailed discussion about that we don't always have time for on air, whatever it may be. Just feel free to send me those questions and comments, suggestions, and we'll do our best to kind of discuss those as we go on here and on a week by week basis. So again, as we have now made it somehow, some way to August already, we've gotten off to a much nicer start temperature-wise to start off the month of August after that tail end of July. No surprise, the rain finally stopped and those temperatures finally climbed. As you're well aware, there at the very end of July is when we finally had kind of our hottest days of the summer. July 30th, just a week ago, we hit 101 in Tulsa, our first triple-digit day of the year. Not saying it'll be the only one. It actually probably will not be the only one, knowing how things go around here. But since then, you talk about flipping the script, and I know it's been a great several-day stretch of temperatures by summertime standards. I mean, right now, from the middle of July to the middle of August, it's called the dog days of summer for a reason, because this is, as you're aware, typically when the worst of the summer heat settles in and really can just kind of bake our area on a day-by-day basis. But we've gone the other direction to start August, especially the first 3 days of August, 3 straight days with highs in the 80s and nice comfortable mornings. Like I said, some very, very welcome relief. And we did have some folks asking us about, with those days in the 80s, saying that seems kind of rare, doesn't it? 80s for highs in August is actually not quite as rare as you might think. And props to Stacia for pulling up these stats really quickly. It was yesterday I saw her pull these stats in. I was like, that's a good one to show. So this probably sounds a little surprising. Honestly, it was a little surprising to me when I looked up the statistics as well, is that, and these are for Tulsa specifically, that Tulsa averages close to 8 days in the month of August with 80-degree highs. When I say 80-degree highs, I mean highs below 90. It's worth noting that this could mean a bunch of days where it was 89 degrees, right? But Tulsa does, when you look at kind of the long-term statistical averages, about 8 days, of the month of August below 90 degrees would be considered average. And every single August over the past, you look back 25, 30 years, we've typically have had several days of that. Now, of course, every year is different, right? And it varies. Some years we've had more or less than others. Of course, we've had 3 so far early in this month of August. It would not hurt my feelings if we have more later on in the month, but we're trending away from that for a while. We're going to go back to the typical summer heat. Now, I will say 70s in August, that is a little bit more rare. As you can see the stats on the screen here, that is something that's much less typical. I mean, getting our highs even down into the 80s for August here in Oklahoma, of course, takes some doing. So getting highs into the 70s, that is much, much more rare. We came really close back on August 1st here in Tulsa. Our high was only 80 degrees, so we came really close to high in the upper 70s on the first day of the month. Like I said, all good things come to an end from a temperature standpoint, and we are trending away from that for the time being. Hopefully we'll bring it, back to those kind of temperatures before too much longer, but it's going to be more typical summertime settling back in. Again, as you're well aware, with triple digits, we've been kind of behind the curve, behind the average this year. Again, no complaints. And as you're well aware, that's largely due to all the rain that we've had through the spring, through the summer. And of course, some of us added on even more rain over the last about week or so as we finally got the break from the summer heat. So far, up to this point, 1 triple-digit day in Tulsa. The long-term average for kind of like an average summer in Tulsa for 100-degree days would be about 11. So with any luck, we will not get up to that average. We would have to have 10 triple-digit days the rest of this month to get there, and not seeing signs that we're exactly going to do that. So with any luck, we'll keep ourselves for the entire summer, for the entire year, below average on 100-degree days. Again, not the worst thing in the world. By this point in the summer, you can see the last few summers, we had quite a few more than this. This is the first time since 2020 that we've had this few 100-degree days through the first part of August. We didn't have any triple-digit days in 2020, by the way. So we're kind of following that curve, that trend so far as temperatures staying, let's call it reasonable by summer standards. Of course, the weather pattern now starting to change from the pattern that we have for the better part of the last 5-6 days. About a week ago, when we were finally getting those triple-digit days here in Green Country, as you look at the big picture here, that heat dome we've talked about all summer was parked right on top of Green Country. That's the typical setup. When it settles right on top of your area, that's typically when you can get some of the worst heat building in. That's what we had about a week ago, and then after that, it slid off to the west, opened the door for that northwest flow in the jet stream that brought us the cold front at the end of last week, which was a pretty good cold front by summer standards, and has also been steering storm complexes out of, say, the Rockies and the central and northern plains down into portions of Oklahoma and Texas over the last several days. Now, that pattern is about to start changing as we head towards the latter half of the week. The heat dome still centering off to our west, but strengthening. So notice as we go from today to about Thursday and Friday, notice that the heat dome is still centered to our west, but it's a lot stronger. You notice that jet stream flow where the arrows are goes way further north, and so that takes the main track for storm systems and storm complexes well from portions of the Pacific Northwest into the northern plains and even the northeast United States. That will continue to help crank up the heat late in the week into the weekend. Now, by later this weekend and into early next week, as I jump ahead a little further here on the big picture, we've been seeing some signs consistently of that. The heat dome, rather than setting up, right on top of Oklahoma, right in the middle of the country again, is that it potentially weakens some and then slides back to the west by this weekend and even into the beginning of next week with kind of some weak upper level flow nearby. That jet stream dips a little further south, and then that upper airflow over Oklahoma would be just kind of a weak upper level flow setup. I will say off the bat that this does not look like it's going to bring us the same type of cold front that we had several days ago that really brought us the big cool down. There had been some suggestions in the forecast models that might happen again in this weekend or early next week, and kind of some excitement about, oh man, we're going to get another big cold front. As of now, as I'm looking at this right now, I don't think that that's as much of a likelihood. More than likely what this pattern would do, if this trend holds through the rest of the week into the weekend, is more or less the heat would continue, but we wouldn't reach the high-end potential. We might be able to keep 100-degree readings away from Oklahoma. And when you're in kind of a weak upper-level flow setup like that, what can happen is small little weak disturbances and storm systems can kind of come drifting in that upper-level flow and produce scattered shower and storm chances, kind of on any given day. And of course, when that happens, that can help relax our temperatures some as well. So as of now, I don't know that we have another big cold front coming our way anytime soon, but the fact that the heat dome after later this week doesn't really center on top of us does bode well for, at the very least, keeping us from getting back into like day after day after day of triple-digit heat. We'll certainly take that. Having said all of that, it is still going to get a lot hotter than it's been the past several days. Once again, the preface being, yeah, I know it's August, none of this is shocking. But compared to the cool down that we got for the first few days of August, the heat stress will kind of take a couple days to get used to again. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, highs are going back into the mid-90s and the upper 90s, especially late week into the first half of the weekend. Heat index over 105. That's back into that category of pretty significant heat stress compared to where we've been recently. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind from mid to late week through the weekend. It'll be another good, looks like, lake weekend, pool weekend to cool off because the temperatures are going to be, ideal for that. And this also kind of highlights the pattern I was just talking about, how there had been kind of some teases and some suggestions in the long-range forecast models of, oh man, maybe another good cold front by the early part of next week and beyond, and some excitement about that. And at the moment, I would say maybe pump the brakes on that, at least the way it's been trending here in the last day or two. This is just kind of the temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center as we head into next week and beyond. Still suggests the temperatures are either at what's typical for this time of year or maybe slightly hotter than normal, more or less kind of in the range that we're trending to, which would keep our highs probably in the mid to upper 90s and slightly hotter at times as we head further down the line into next week. Again, that's as we head into the middle of August, and I know none of that is shocking at all, but I would say at the moment, at least as of now, recording here, maybe the trends will change in a few days. I'm seeing less signs of there being just like another big front like the one that we had at the end of last week. But of course, that's something we'll keep a close eye on as far as the trends are concerned. One more thing I wanted to mention before we kind of wrap up here on this week in weather is, of course, this time of year, the tropics are a big point of discussion, whether or not they're going to impact us here in Green Country. And especially here the last few weeks is, the Atlantic Basin, as far as tropical activity, has been fairly quiet comparatively speaking. There haven't been, a large amount of named storm systems and nothing that's been, impacting land significantly. As of today, as of recording today, we're up to 4 named storms. The most recent that's the 4 names that I've got highlighted. They're the most recent tropical storm Dexter, which is well out in the Atlantic, and that's where it's going to stay. It's northeast of Bermuda. It has kind of a disorganized look to it, as you can see on satellite, and it's going to continue to move east and northeast and stay out in the Atlantic, not a landfall threat. But I point this out to say that, because up to this point, the last few weeks, the tropics have been quiet, and it's kind of inevitable this time of year. A lot of folks have already been saying, okay, well, I thought this was going to be a really busy season, and not much has happened yet. Maybe not much is going to happen. I think it's always worth pointing out what the typical climatology is of tropical systems. We're just now getting into the point where you can see kind of that the bell curve there is climbing for typical tropical activity as far as named storms and even hurricanes. Where here we are at the beginning of August, look where we head. I mean, really it's late August and even into the first part of September is when we are in the range of typically much more frequent tropical development. So I just point that out to say that for folks that have already been saying, it's already been quiet, I don't know if anything's going to happen this tropical season, we got a long way to go on the tropical hurricane season. And of course, it's like many things, every year is different. Some years, tropical activity starts off with a flourish and then keeps going all season. Some years starts with a flourish and fades. Other years starts quiet, and then the second half of the season kicks in, and all of a sudden there are named storms seemingly every few days. We'll see how this one pans out specifically, but I just say that to point out that there's a long way to go on this tropical season in the Atlantic Basin, and right on cue, what you're seeing here on the screen is the tropical outlook for the next several days. A couple areas that are now being monitored by the National Hurricane Center well out in the Atlantic, kind of the typical setup where a wave or two comes off of the western tip of Africa into the Atlantic and gets right into kind of that peak Atlantic development zone where storms can get going, where there's not a lot of wind shear, and then they head west, and then we have to kind of keep an eye out on where they go. So that zone's being monitored over the next several days, and there's also an area off the coast of the Carolinas that over the next few days, by late in the week, even into this weekend, there's a possibility, just with kind of the weak upper level flow that it's under at the moment, that there could be at least maybe some sort of tropical depression development in those areas off the coast of the Carolinas. At the moment, it doesn't appear like that would be something that would be like a major named storm, but it bears watching because those little systems that kind of can drift off the coast can often be a little bit more difficult to forecast, can be sometimes a little bit more erratic and weaken and strengthen more than we sometimes think. So over the end of the week and even into the weekend, folks along the Carolina coast will be keeping a close eye on that possibility for a system. So that's kind of where the tropics stand at the moment, where our weather stands at the moment. As always, like I said, appreciate you checking in with me on This Week in Weather, streaming on our News on 6 YouTube channel. And as I always say, you know where to find me if you've got some questions, comments, suggestions on what you'd like to hear us discuss. And, last week I had my coworker Alan Crone from the mornings on here, and we had a really great discussion. And as I go forward here, hoping to have more guests join me to have discussions about, like I said, any type of weather that we think might be a good discussion topic on here on This Week in Weather. As always, appreciate you guys joining me here. We'll see you next week. Take care of each other.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma's own digital studio live stream from the Bob Mills Weather Center. Stay with News on 6 online and on television anytime for the latest weather updates to keep you safe and informed.